The slippery human mechanic slid a hidden micro-camera deep inside the Evora ship's hyperdrive, smirking as his hands deftly finished the repair job, one the insectoids would soon regret letting him do alone. "It's all done here, Captain," Eric shouted up to Primus, the ship's irritable hierarchical leader. The rugged 35-year-old wiped greasy hands on his coveralls and gave a cheeky grin, purring like a kitten now. Eric hummed an ancient Earth ditty as he climbed out, much to the fascination and mild annoyance of the chittering insectoid crew. "Your strange human methods may work for now, Davis, but such insubordination will not be tolerated forever." Primus clicked, antennae twitching in irritation that he was forced to rely on this unpredictable human at all. Eric shrugged, stretching his muscular arms wide. "Hey, it got your ship flying again." Though the human's results were hard to argue with, Eric's disregard for protocol chafed against the Evora's rigid, regimented ways. "Do not make us regret bringing you and your handful of soft-skinned friends on board. Remember, we decide whether your kind spreads beyond your little blue marble," Primus snapped, before angrily scuttling off. Eric stared at the alien's back, hands balling into white-knuckled fists. These fucking bugs would never respect humanity. Eric knew he had to do something about it. Adjusting his hidden micro-camera, he crept off to spy on the insectoids, eavesdropping on two crewmates mentioning a secret military project. If humans could get a hold of the aliens' special new weapon, the one that might turn the tide of their ongoing war, it would mean humanity had leverage against these condescending insects for once. At last, his species could escape their future as third-class citizens, servants to the mighty Evora Empire. Eric would do whatever it took to secure humanity's freedom in the stars. The pompous Evora be damned. The mechanic slunk further down the passageway to investigate, knowing if he was caught, there would be dire consequences for him and every human in space. Eric hunched over his workbench, fiddling with a small circular device. Wires stuck out at odd angles as he carefully soldered a chip into place. The device was a makeshift cloaking field generator he'd been secretly building in his spare time, hoping it might come in handy. Suddenly alarms blared throughout the ship, red lights flashing. Eric nearly dropped his soldering iron in surprise. Primus's voice crackled over the intercom. "All crew to battle stations. A Zorax warship has ambushed us and is demanding we surrender the secret weapon." "Fuck," Eric muttered under his breath. The Zorax must have spies within the Evora ranks to know about the weapon. The ship rocked violently as enemy fire slammed into the hull. Eric grabbed his cloaking device and raced to the bridge, stumbling as explosions echoed through the corridors. On the bridge, Primus frantically jabbed at the controls, trying to outmaneuver the Zorax ship, but it was no use. The Zorax vessel was far more heavily armed. Consoles sparked and smoked as the Evora ship took hit after hit. "Captain, I have an idea," Eric shouted over the chaos. He held up his cloaking device. "This can conceal our ship long enough for us to get away." Primus swiveled his head to glare at Eric, compound eyes flashing. "We have no need for your human trickery," he spat. Just then, another blast rocked the bridge, nearly throwing Eric off his feet. Primus's expression shifted as he realized they were out of options. "Fine. Do it." Eric slammed the device onto a console and activated it. The ship shimmered and vanished from view, the cloaking field enveloping it. On the view screen, they watched as the Zorax ship's weapons fire streaked through empty space where they had just been. Primus punched the throttle, and the Evora ship shot forward, slipping past the Zorax vessel. But just as they thought they were in the clear, a lucky shot from the enemy scored a direct hit on their hyperdrive. The ship shuddered, consoles going dark as main power failed. They drifted in space, cloaked but stranded. "Your quick thinking may have saved us, human," Primus said grudgingly, "but now the Zorax know of our secret project, this bodes ill." As the crew scrambled to repair the damage, Primus pulled Eric aside. "The weapon they seek is a genetically engineered virus, designed to wipe out the Zorax," he revealed. "It targets their unique physiology. With it, we could end their threat to the Evora forever." Eric recoiled in horror at the implications. Wait, you're talking about genocide. How can you justify that? Primus's mandibles clicked in agitation. It is necessary for our survival. The Zorax would do the same to us if they could. As the crippled Evora ship limped its way towards the nearest repair outpost, Eric's mind remained fixed on the horrifying reality of the biological weapon. He paced back and forth in his cramped quarters, unable to shake the nagging unease that gnawed at his conscience. Eric knew he had to learn more. Sneaking into an empty computer lab, he accessed the ship's secure database and began digging for any information on the virus. What Eric found made his blood run cold. Not only was the engineered pathogen 100% lethal to Zorax physiology, it triggered an excruciating slow death that could drag on for weeks. Skin lesions, organ failure, brain inflammation. The poor bastards would suffer immensely before finally succumbing. But that wasn't the worst of it. The Evora's plans called for unleashing the virus on the Zorax homeworld itself, a world teeming with billions of civilians who would be helpless against the invisible killer. Men, women, children, an entire species, could be wiped out. Eric slammed his fist against the console, a cold sweat beading on his forehead. He had to confront Primus. The human stormed onto the bridge, interrupting a heated strategic discussion between the captain and his senior officers. "Primus, we need to talk now," Eric said flatly, locking eyes with the insectoid leader. Primus dismissed his officers with an irritated wave of his forearms. "What is it this time, Davis? We're in the middle of planning our next—" "Your secret weapon is a goddamn war crime," Eric shouted, cutting him off. "I've seen the data on that virus. It's not just a quick killer, it's a torture device that will cause unimaginable suffering, and you want to unleash it on civilians, on a whole planet. Have you lost your fucking mind?" Primus rose to his full height, towering over the human. His compound eyes flashed with barely contained rage. "You dare question our military decisions, ape? Have you forgotten that we are fighting for the very survival of our species? The Zorax would not hesitate to annihilate us if they had the chance." Eric stood his ground, even as Primus's antennae twitched threateningly. "There's a line, Primus, a line that separates us from the monsters we fight against. If you cross it, you're no better than them. Genocide is never justified, no matter the situation." The captain's mandibles clicked furiously. "We do not have the luxury of your naive human morality. This is war, Davis, and in war, the ends justify the means." Eric opened his mouth to protest, but Primus cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Enough, I will not be lectured by some primitive primate barely capable of spaceflight. Remember your place, human. You are a guest among the Evora, tolerated only for your skills. Question me again and I will have you thrown off this ship, survival be damned." Just then a shrill alarm pierced the air. A comms officer frantically manipulated the control panels. "Captain, incoming distress call from Colony Zeta 9. They're under Zorax attack." A cold smile crept across Primus's features. "The perfect opportunity to test our new weapon, wouldn't you say?" Eric watched in horror as Primus turned to his crew and ordered them to set a course for the besieged colony. He had to act, and fast. Slipping away in the chaos, Eric made his way to the biolab, where he knew samples of the virus were stored. Heart pounding, he used his clearance as ship's mechanic to access the sealed room. Inside, rows of vials glinted under harsh white light. Eric scanned the labels until he found what he was looking for. He grabbed the vial, stuffing it into his pocket. If he could just analyze it, maybe he could find a way to neutralize the virus, or at least slow its spread. He had to try. Suddenly, the door slid open behind him. Eric spun around to find a trio of armed Evora security guards aiming plasma rifles at his chest. "Step away from the samples, human," the lead guard chittered. "You are under arrest for treason against the Evora Empire." Before Eric could react, a stun blast caught him square in the chest. His muscles seized and he crumpled to the floor, consciousness fading. The last thing he saw before blacking out was the guards dragging him away roughly. Eric woke to the hum of a force field. He was in the brig, a bare cell bathed in sickly green light. The Evora ship shuddered around him as it hurtled through warp space towards the attacked colony, towards the site of an impending atrocity. Panic gripped Eric's heart as he realized the full weight of the situation. He had to find a way out of this cell, had to stop Primus from unleashing that terrible virus. But how? The force field crackled menacingly, and the heavy footfalls of Evora guards echoed in the corridor outside. Eric's mind raced desperately, searching for a solution. He knew that every second brought them closer to the point of no return. The fate of an entire species, and perhaps Eric's faith in his own, hung in the balance. He had to act, and he had to act now. Eric's mind raced as he paced the confines of his cell, the force field humming ominously. He had to get out, had to stop Primus from unleashing that horrific virus on the Zorax colony. But how? His eyes darted around the sparse brig, searching for anything he could use. Then it hit him, the environmental controls. If he could just access the system, he might be able to create a diversion. Eric knelt by the cell's small wall panel, prying it open with deft fingers. He'd spent enough time tinkering with the ship's systems to know his way around. Hacking into the environmental controls, Eric quickly overrode the safety protocols. He set the temperature in the crew quarters to plummet, then triggered a series of blaring false alarms throughout the ship. As the lights flickered and klaxons wailed, Eric heard the stomp of guards running to investigate the chaos. Seizing his chance, Eric short-circuited the force field with a well-placed jolt from the exposed wiring. The field sputtered out, and he sprinted down the corridor, ducking into a maintenance shaft. Heart pounding, Eric crawled through the tight space, making his way to the armory. Inside, he quickly located his cloaking device along with a handful of other useful gadgets. Pocketing the items, Eric slipped back into the shadows, creeping towards the communications hub. The hub was eerily quiet, the usual chatter of comms officers replaced by the shrill alarms still echoing through the ship. Eric darted to a console, his fingers flying over the controls as he composed a coded message to the Zorax. "This is Eric Davis of the Evora ship Nexus," he began, his voice low and urgent. "I have critical information about a biological weapon being developed by the Evora, a virus designed to wipe out your entire species. I want to help find a peaceful solution before this conflict escalates beyond control. Please, if you value the lives of your people, meet with me. Let's work together to end this war." Eric hit send, his heart in his throat as he watched the message encrypt and beam out into space. He could only hope the Zorax would listen. To his surprise, a response came mere minutes later. The Zorax agreed to a secret meeting on a nearby neutral moon. Eric wasted no time. Activating his cloaking device, he slipped unseen to the shuttle bay and boarded a small craft, rocketing away from the Evora ship. The moon was barren and lifeless, its surface pockmarked with craters. Eric sat down near the coordinates the Zorax had provided, stepping out to find a small delegation already waiting, their insectoid features cast in stark relief by the shuttle's running lights. "I am Commander Zaxxon of the Zorax Imperium," the leader said, his voice a rasping click. "You have taken a great risk in contacting us, human. Speak quickly before we change our mind." Eric took a deep breath, meeting Zaxxon's compound gaze. "The Evora have developed a virus that targets Zorax physiology. It's horrific, an agonizing death sentence for your entire species. They plan to unleash it on your colony as a test." Zaxxon's antennae twitched, his posture stiffening. "And you expect us to believe this coming from an Evora agent? Why should we trust you?" "Because I'm not just an Evora agent. I'm a human and I have a conscience. My species has seen the horrors of biological warfare, the devastation it can cause. I can't let that happen again, not to anyone." Eric stepped forward, his voice earnest. "This war, this cycle of violence, it will only lead to more suffering on both sides. There has to be another way. I propose a joint task force, Evora and Zorax working together to find an alternative solution, a path to peace, and I'm willing to act as a neutral mediator." The Zorax delegation chittered amongst themselves, clearly taken aback by Eric's words. Finally, Zaxxon spoke. "You are either very brave or very foolish, human, but your sincerity is evident. We will consider your proposal and suspend our attack on the colony for now, but know that if you betray us, the consequences will be severe." With that, the Zoracs turned and marched back to their own shuttle, leaving Eric alone on the barren moon. He let out a shaky breath, hardly believing what had just transpired, but he knew his work was far from over. As Eric docked his shuttle back on the Evora ship, he was greeted by a grim sight. A squad of heavily armed guards, their weapons trained on him, and at their head, mandibles clicking with barely restrained fury, was Primus. "Davis," the captain snarled, his voice dripping with venom, "you dare betray us, communicate with the enemy behind our backs? I knew you humans couldn't be trusted." Eric raised his hands slowly, his mind racing. "Primus, listen to me. The Zoracs have agreed to suspend their attack, to consider a peaceful solution. We have a chance to end this war, to save countless lives on both sides." But Primus was beyond reason, his compound eyes flashing with rage. "All I hear are the words of a traitor. You have jeopardized our greatest weapon, our only hope for victory. Guards, seize him." As the guards closed in, Eric knew he had only one choice. He activated his cloaking device, shimmering out of sight as the Evora lunged for him. Chaos erupted in the hangar, plasma bolts scorching the air where he'd stood moments before. Eric ran, weaving unseen through the corridors of the ship he once called home. He had to find a way to make Primus see reason, to convince the stubborn captain that peace was the only way forward. But with the entire ship now on high alert, hunting him as a traitor, that task seemed almost impossible. Still, Eric refused to give up. The fate of 2 species and the lives of billions hung in the balance. He would find a way or die trying. The chase was on, and time was running out. Eric's heart pounded as he crept through the shadows of the Evora ship, the weight of his decision heavy on his shoulders. He had to reach the communications room, had to make one last desperate plea for peace before Primus could unleash the virus. Slipping inside, Eric locked the door and raced to the console. His fingers flew over the controls, overriding the security protocols with a skill born of desperation. He took a deep breath, then opened a channel to both the Evora and Zorax fleets. "This is Eric Davis, a human serving aboard the Evora ship Nexus," he began, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his gut. "I come to you not as an enemy, but as a friend, as someone who believes in the possibility of peace." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "The Evora have developed a biological weapon, a virus designed to wipe out the Zoracs. It causes unimaginable suffering, a slow and agonizing death, and they plan to unleash it on not just soldiers, but civilians, men, women, children." Eric's voice cracked with emotion. "I've seen the projections. Billions will die, an entire species pushed to the brink of extinction. Is this what we want? Is this the legacy we choose to leave?" He leaned forward, his eyes blazing with conviction. "I know you're tired of war, tired of the endless cycle of violence and retribution. So am I. But there's another way, a path of dialogue, of understanding. A path where Evora and Zorax work together to build a better future. I'm not naive. I know peace won't be easy, but the alternative, a genocide fueled by hatred and fear, that's a darkness from which none of us will return." Eric's words hung in the air, a challenge and a plea all at once. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the ship's engines. Then a chorus of voices erupted over the comms. Evora and Zorax alike, soldiers and civilians, all echoing Eric's call for peace. The tide was turning. But not everyone was swayed. Primus's voice cut through the chatter, cold and unyielding. "Davis, you treasonous filth! You dare side with the enemy? Poison the minds of our people with your spineless idealism?" Eric heard shouts and plasma fire in the background of Primus's transmission. A mutiny, hardliners determined to see the virus deployed no matter the cost. "You've doomed us all, human," Primus roared. "If we cannot have victory, we will have vengeance." The link went dead, leaving Eric in a terrifying silence. He had to stop Primus, had to find a way to destroy the virus before it was too late. Suddenly, the door to the comms room burst open. But instead of Primus's loyalists, Eric found himself face to face with a group of Evora dissidents, their expressions grim but determined. "Davis," their leader said, mandibles clicking urgently, "we heard your message. We want to help. Eric nodded, a flicker of hope kindling in his chest. We have to get to the biolab, destroy the virus samples before Primus can get his claws on them. The dissidents handed Eric a plasma rifle, the weight familiar in his hands. Together they raced through the corridors, a strange alliance united by a common goal. As they neared the lab, the sounds of battle grew louder. Primus's forces had beaten them there, a desperate last stand to secure the virus. Eric and the dissidents charged forward, plasma bolts filling the air. They fought with a fury born of desperation, each fallen comrade only fueling their resolve. In the chaos, a stray shot ruptured the containment unit holding the virus samples. A hissing cloud of deadly pathogen filled the air, indiscriminate in its hunger. Eric watched in horror as Evora on both sides began to succumb, their exoskeletons bubbling with lesions. He knew it was only a matter of time before he too fell victim. With a last burst of strength, Eric sealed the lab doors, trapping himself and the infected inside. He could feel the virus taking hold, his lungs burning with each ragged breath. As he slumped to the floor, Eric's thoughts turned to the future he had fought for, the peace he had dared to dream of. It was up to the Evora and Zorax now to honor the sacrifice of those who had given everything for a chance at a better tomorrow. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.